Hey everyone, welcome to this week's video. In this week's video we're going to continue on with the context menu that we made quite a while ago. I'll put a card up above now so you can reference that if you've not seen that before. But essentially what it does is if you've played a game similar to like RuneScape or maybe any other MMORPG, you'll have this context menu. So when you right click on something, you'll have options relating to that object. So such as this door, so you can open this door, examine it, walk to it, or cancel the sort of menu entirely. So if you examine it, you can set up custom messages, which this is the mighty door of Gunbridge. If you examine it, if you open it, the door just opens, and then obviously the option then changes to close because you can't open an open door. So the option changes, and you can set these up for anything. And essentially this is using an interface, so you can put this on any item, and you can have the menu item that you need for that object. So without any further ado, let's jump into it and let's get this built. Okay, so I've loaded up the project from last time. Now it is probably worth noting that this is made in Unreal 4 and then it's been converted to Unreal 5. I've done that because I prefer the top-down template from Unreal 4, and I haven't tested this with the template from Unreal 5. So if you have been running into any issues, let me know down below. I am planning on remaking the original video, and I probably will do that from Unreal 5, but that's not just yet. So just in case you run into any issues, this was made in Unreal 4 originally. Anyway, so if you have followed along with the previous video, then you'll have something similar to this. So what we're going to do is we're just going to crack on. So if you press play, you should have a menu that's like this, and typically when you right click on separate items, the name should change in the examine field. Currently the walk here works, the examined works to a point where it just tells you that you've examined something, and cancel works. So let's add in some additional features of being able to interact with things. So if we open up this our content drawer, I'm actually going to dock this just to make it a bit easier. What I want to do is I want to go to my top-down BP, go to my blueprints, open up my HUD, and we're going to make a change to the context menu first. Now, so we've got walk here, examine, and cancel. I'm just going to copy the examine button because that is the closest one to how I'd like the interact button to look like. So I'm going to right-click, duplicate, and I'm going to drag that straight to the top. So it's right at the top. I'm going to rename it to interact. I'm also going to change the interact text to interact with. Now later in the video we will get this to dynamically update with whatever the interaction type is, so open, drink, or that or the like. But then also I want to change the object here to make sure that it binds to the update examine text. Now this is the same function from the examine. Because it does the exact same thing, I'm not going to make a new one just for the update interact text. Just reuse the stuff that already works. And that's pretty much it from this point of view. One thing we could do is... Now we're going to leave it like that for now, that's fine. But I am going to select the button and I'm going to head over to the graph. And then the button should still be selected, and with that at the bottom now we should have events, and you can select the on pressed. That creates this event. So if we do click the interact, this sort of thing is going to trigger, and with that, similarly to how we've created all the other buttons with an event dispatcher, we're going to do the same. So if on the left, go to event dispatchers, click a new one and do interact pressed, and hit compile and drag that over, and we're going to call that. Now we are going to come back later on and just make a slight edit to this just to carry some extra data, but for the now what we can do is just save. So now if you press play and right click on an item, you'll see that it says interact with. This has a really long name, but if you click on it, it doesn't do anything just yet. What we can do is go back to our HUD and open up our main HUD. And what we want to do is straight over to the graph. We're going to select context menu, and you'll see that down in the events, interact pressed has now been added, and you can just click on that. And then for the time being, all we're going to do is we're just going to copy this set visibility and this print string from the examine above it. And what we'll do is we'll just drag that down here. Because for now, the only functionality we've really got is we want the menu to disappear when we click it. And instead of examined, we'll have interacting. Just so that we know that it's working. So we'll hit play, right click, and we'll interact. And you can see that we are now interacting. So this is where we're going to build the blueprint interface, and we'll get some functionality working with that. Now, just before I do, what I want to do is I just want to create an item like a door, which is going to be more suited to being interacted with. So if you interact with a door, you either want it to open or close. Whereas these cubes that are in the world, the interaction, there isn't an interaction for them, at least not from my perspective. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to blueprints, go back one folder, and I'm just going to right click and I'm going to create a new blueprint class. That's going to be an actor, and I'm going to call this BP underscore door, just for simplicity, and we're going to open it. Now I want my door to open on a hinge, so what I'm going to do before I do anything is add in a scene. A scene is basically just an empty vessel which has a location, rotation and scale. It doesn't really have anything else behind it. And it's used mainly as like a placeholder, or it's just something for you to build onto, in a sense. So with the scene being added, I'm going to also add in a static mesh, and this is going to be my door. You can rename this if you want, so door. And then for the static mesh on the right hand side where it says none, we're going to pick 1 meter cube. And straight away I'm going to change the Y to 0.2, and I'm going to change the size of my door to 1.8, which will be 180 wide, and then I'm going to make it 2 meters high, or 2 high. So this is 1.8 meters wide by 2 meters high, which isn't your standard door, but for my game that's what I want. So what I want it to actually do, I want the door to be in the corner of the scene upwards, so I'm just going to move it. Now, because obviously I've set it to a scale of 2, halfway should be 100 units, and then for the X, 1.8, so half of that would be 90, so hopefully now that should be in the corner. And if I compile that, I'm just going to drag that into my world, and I'm going to put it there. Now conveniently I have moved over this block just some that this actually looks like a door that's blocking this gap. So now when we go and animate it for the door action, I'll be able to walk through here. Now I know I can walk around, but let's not get into that. Okay, so now we need to create this interaction layer. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a blueprint interface. Now, blueprint interfaces are pretty cool. If you've not used them before, it allows you to... They're essentially a middleman between blueprints. You can create some sort of predetermined functions like interact in the interface, and you can have 2 objects talk to each other through the interface, which is pretty neat. So I'm going to call this BPI interact, and we'll open that up. Now, straight away when you open up a new interface, it'll want a function name, so this for me is just going to be interact, and for now that's all we need. Let's just hit save, and we'll go back to our door. So with inside the door, we need to sort of associate this interface to our door. We can do that by adding it into the class settings. So up at the top you've got class settings, give that a click. On the right hand side you've got implemented interfaces, which at the moment we don't have any. We're going to press add, and then in the list here we should see BPI interface, interact. I'm just going to select that and press compile. Once you've pressed compile, what you'll notice is you've now got this interface with this interact option underneath. So what that allows you to do now is essentially you can implement this interact event. So if you right click, you can implement event, and this gives you this interface event. Now what this is relying on now is some other blueprint inside your game can call this event. So if we right click and put interact, Okay, so it doesn't work with inside this one, but I will show you from here maybe. So if we right click and we do interact, you'll see now that there is interact message. So essentially what this is similar to how like an event dispatcher works. It sends out a notification that I want to interact with something that has the event of interact. Now, when you call this, you do need to reference the target which has it in, because if you imagine you've got a door, you've got windows, you've got items on the ground that you want to interact with all of them. If you don't select which one you want to interact with, essentially the program doesn't know, and if it didn't have a failsafe in, it could interact with all of them at the same time, which gets weird. But for now, we'll just come back to that. I just thought I'd explain how that works. So what we can do now is we can build out this interact function. So when I'm interacted with, I need to know what's my current state. What am I? I'm a door. So am I already open? Am I already closed? What state am I in? So to help us do that, what we're going to create is an enumerator as well. So I'm going to go back to where we did the BPI interface, interact, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to create another blueprint enumeration. So I'm going to call this context menu option maybe. And essentially this is also going to populate our list of when we right click on something, what options that I have available. So we'll open this up, and I'm just going to create 3 of them for now. My first one's going to be null, and the reason for that is because later on what we'll do is, I tell you what, we'll come back and do that later on. So for now, all we're going to have is open and closed, or close, should I say. So that's all we need to do. So sorry if I did that a bit too quick. All we're doing is creating 2 enumerators, one called open, one called closed, and we're going to save that and close it. So now with inside our door, what we need to do is we need to create a variable to store what current state we're in. So if we add a variable, we're going to put current, you could put current state, I guess. You could also put current context menu type, something like that. But we need to change the type to that enumerator. So then it's got our options in. So if we do e_context, you should see here at the bottom you've got e-context menu options. We'll select that. I'm going to hit compile, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the first state to actually, I tell you what, I am going to rename this to context menu option. I'm going to put current, actually, current, because I'm thinking about how this is going to play out actually. So it's the current option that you'll see when you right click on this object, which by default I actually want that to say open because it's currently closed. So it's kind of like, it works opposite in a sense. So let me drag that out and get that, and then essentially what we're going to do is we need to make a decision based on what that current option is. So if the option is open and we receive an interact, we want the door to then open. So we need to kind of switch what we do based on what option we've got. So if we do switch, and the only option that you should have when you type in switch is the one that you is for your context menu, and that's because you're dragging from the context menu option itself. So with that switch, let's drag into there, and then we just need to create, what do we do when we get an open request, and what do we do when we get a close request. Okay, so let's move on to the animation part of things. So essentially we just need to make the door essentially rotate around the scene. So if we just rotate the scene on the y-axis between 0 and let's say 90, we can just create the appearance of an opening door. So with that in mind, what we could do is in the event graph is, if we just put the open and close to one side for now, if we just right click and add in a timeline, what we can do is we can create a timeline track to go from 0 and 1 and have a value change based on that timeline change. So I'm just going to call this one move, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to add a track, but I'm going to add a track of length 1 for 1 second. Press add track, and I'm going to add a float track. Now I'm going to call this one alpha, and you'll see why in just a sec. But essentially, if you hold shift and click on this timeline, I'm going to have one at the beginning, one at the end. But I'm just going to click on these and just make sure that these are accurate. I'm going to change the time to 0 and make sure the value is 0. And then for the second one, I'm going to have the time as 1 and have the value as 1 as well. Then if you click on these little buttons here, this will fit your timeline to the screen. And then what we want to do is I'm just going to add some sort of natural smoothing to this, and right click on this first dot and press auto. And you'll see that this bends this line, so you get this nice gradual curve to simulate a smoother animation. Now, if you want a slightly different visual effect, you might want to change this to user and sort of adjust this yourself, or if you want it back to original, select linear. I prefer this nice curve on auto. I think it looks the best. So you can then close the timeline tab. We don't need to go back into that. And then how do we adjust now that rotation value? So because this is anchored to our scene, I'm just going to grab that in. I'm also going to get its relative rotation. So here, get relative rotation. And essentially this is its relative rotation in relation to the default scene view, which is fine. So typically your rotation then starts from 0, and we can just add 90 to it. It won't take the world rotation into effect. So we can then split this, so then we break it down into all its pieces. And then from the update, over time or as we're making changes, we want to update the output rotation. So here we're going to reset relative rotation. So here, set relative rotation. Actually, we want rotation for the scene. Make sure you select the one we've seen. Or what you could do is you could change that target to this scene and just get rid of this one. So you've only got one node on the screen at a time. Move that up so it's nice and straight. And then for this rotation, I'm actually going to make some changes. So we're going to split this. We want to keep the X, we want to keep the Y, but we want to make changes to the Z. So to do this, I mentioned we need to sort of go from 0 to 90. We can do that with a lerp. And you can see now that this takes in an A, a B, and an alpha. We created our alpha track in our timeline, so we'll add that together. And currently my door is sat at 0. The rotation is 0 because the door is effectively closed. And to open it, I would just want to adjust the door by 90. So we're going to have A at 0 and B at 90. So when we interact and we get that change, that update, it's going to change to 90 degrees. And that return value is going to become our Z. So that is pretty much our animation. All we need to do now is trigger it. So when I press play on my track, I'm going to go from a closed door to an open door. So effectively, what we need to do is when we open, we need to play, and when we get a closed signal, we want to reverse. But before we do that, there's one extra thing we need to do, and if we receive a signal to open, we then need to change our current context menu option to close, because once we've opened the door, we don't want the menu to still say open. We want it to change to closed. So to do that, what we want to do is drag our context menu option and set, and change this now to close. And essentially what's going to happen is you're going to receive an open signal. You're then going to set the menu option to closed, but this is going to carry on and open the door for us. So then the next time we come round, this option is going to be close. We're going to go through close and we're going to close it. But with that being said, we're going to need to set the closed one back to open. So effectively you've got this sort of open close scenario where it changes itself. So now when we get open, we want to play, and when we get close, we want to reverse that and close the door. So in theory this should now work. We're going to compile and save that, but we need to have this interface triggered. So to do that, obviously, if we go back to the main, where we have this interacting print string, behind this, what we want to do is we want to have an interact message. Now, if I press compile, this is going to complain. It's going to say, okay, you're telling me to interact, but who do I interact with? I need some sort of information here. So to get that information, what we can do is in our context menu, if we go to the update examine text, you can see what we're actually doing is we're getting the player controller, finding out what we've hit and getting the actor and getting its name. So we can do the same thing. We can use this existing sort of hit result, but we can say, does this implement an interface? So we can select the interface here in this purple box and select BPI interact. So what we're saying here is the actor that you've clicked on, does it have this interaction interface? And if we do a branch, if that's true, let's get a reference of that actor and ask it to do its interaction. So that's what we're going to do. So let's get rid of this bit for now. Well, don't get rid of it. Just move it out of the way. But let's move our branch upwards. Let's put it into there. Now, either way, true or false, we want to return the name. So I'm just going to copy this return node, and I'm going to put that on false, and I'm going to connect that one to true, because no matter if this is true or false, I always want to get the name of the object. But if it is true, what I also want to do is I want to promote this hit result to a variable. So set that to true. Put that on the true line. So we're setting that hit actor as a variable. So we'll hit compile, and then if we go back to the event graph, oh, I've pulled that out by accident. One sec. If we go back to the event graph, when we get this on pressed interact, what we want to do is we actually want to get an input, which is that actor, and then we can send it through to the interact option. So let's go back here. On our interact pressed event dispatcher, you can have an input here. Just press this little plus sign, and we want to put actor, or let's change it to hit actor, and then the actual type wants to be actor. Let's put that. Oh, that didn't change. So actor, select that, and then select object reference. So you can see now that your sort of call interact pressed now has this hit actor. Hit compile, and then what we can do is we can drag this variable, our hit actor, over to this, and that'll feed in. So essentially what's happening is this update text is getting our actor that we've hit. We're setting this variable to hit actor, and then we're plugging that into the event dispatcher, which means now if we compile and go back to our main, you'll see that your interact pressed now has a hit actor function. So we can just plug that straight into that. Now, before we start running this, we just need to think about it is, what if our object doesn't have an interact? This hit actor is not going to be valid, and we're going to try and do something that's not going to work. So just for safety, what we should do is, I'm just going to tidy this up a little bit and just add in a couple of reroute nodes just to make it look a little bit prettier. But essentially what we want to do is we want to get an is valid node, and that's this one here at the bottom with the question mark. Essentially, it takes in an object, so we'll plug that in, which we actually, to make it look even prettier, let's just double click again and plug that into there like that. Let's move that down. So what we're saying now is this hit actor sort of data reference, is it actually valid? If it is valid, then pass it into our interact. If it's not valid, we're not going to do anything. So providing I have not missed anything here, if we press play now and we right click on our door and interact, you can see that now our door opens. So if you click on it again, it now closes. That's brilliant. So all we need to do now is let's adjust this menu where instead of it saying interact with, it'll say either open, closed, or whatever interaction that you're trying to build. Okay, so for this, what we actually want to do is we want to build on top of our BPI interact, and we need to add in some extra functionality now. So as well as just taking an interact function and sort of animating our door in this instance, what we can do is we can add a couple of other functions to say, get the name of the object, get a description, what's the current context menu option, and all that sort of stuff. So what we can do is we can add a new function, and we can put get current or get context menu options, I guess. Context options. And what we're going to need to do is this is going to need to take. Is it going to take? This is going to give an output of what current option we have. So for outputs, we'll just press add, and then we'll put context options, and then what we'll do is we'll select the enum context menu options, and that should be it for this. So what we'll do is we'll just test this one first. So I've hit compile to make sure that's pushed through, and then if we now go to our door, you'll see on the left we've got get context options. So we can double click on that, and really all we need to do is just drag our current context menu option into this, and then that'll return what our options are. So that's pretty neat. So now if we go back to our context menu and we go to designer, now if we click on this interact with, we can now create a new binding and call this one, it's not waiting for me to type anything, so I'm just going to rename this, and oh, wrong one, get text, rename this to update interaction option. I said interaction, but I didn't type it, interaction option. And really what's going to happen here is this is going to be very similar to how this works. So really what we want to do is we want to copy a chunk of this. I'm just going to copy essentially this middle bit. Copy that. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to paste. Did that happen? Oh, there we go. So paste. I'm going to plug that into here. And if the thing that we did click on does have this hit result, then what we want to do is we want to pull out here and say get, what did we call it now? Context menu options. Ooh. So if that's true, get the context menu options and plug that into that. And then from this one, we actually want to get a select. Now, if we plug this context options into our index, you'll see that this changes. So basically, if our context menu option is currently set to open, we want this to say open. And if it says close, we want to set this to close. And if it's false, we just want it to say interact with. Do we want it to do that actually? Actually, what I'm thinking is if that's false, we want to hide the menu, don't we actually? Can we do that from in here? If we have the... What we can actually do is if we go back to designer, we can select this entire button, and on the right hand side you can see here under visibility we can do a bind, which is much easier because we can create that binding, and now essentially the output is either visible or not visible. So what we can do is essentially if we copy this, now thinking about it, what might be a better scenario to do is instead of casting to this every time we click on it, we could save this hit result, because that's not the way that I've developed it originally, I'm not going to do it just now, just in case that causes any issues, but that's something that you should probably look at, and I'm definitely going to look at after this video. But I'm going to select these items that you can see here, and I'm just going to move these over to my Get Interactive Visibility. I'm going to paste that in here, connect that up there, and then essentially if our does implement interface returns true, we want it to be visible, and if it's false, we want it to be not visible. So let's copy that, paste that, set that to collapsed, plug that into false. I'm going to disconnect this one, or reconnect that one. So into the branch, if this is true, we want to see it. If it's not true, we don't want to see it. And that's as simple as that, to be honest. So if we hit compile now and play, hopefully if I click on that, it's there. If I click on that, it's not. And if I click on that, it is. So that's that bit. So essentially we just need to do the same thing, but to get a description. So in our BPI interact, if we add a new function and get, you could say get examined text. I'm just going to do get description. Description, and again this output is going to be a string. Is it going to be a string or is it going to be a text? I feel like it's going to be a text. I'll leave it as string for now, and I'm going to put this as description. Call that description, hit compile. If we go back to our door now, you can see that we've got get description. If we double click that, we just need to feed in a description, but we don't have one yet. So let's just promote this to a variable, and that has given us our description, which now if we hit compile, on the right hand side you can put this is a mighty door. Hit compile, that's now our description, and what we can do is back in our context menu, I believe, if we go back to examined text. So now what we can do is in our examined text, if it does implement an interact is true, what we can do is we can add in this get description message, which will pull this description, and we can plug that into our... Oh no, actually, sorry, that is going to be wrong. It's right in a sense, but it's wrong that I don't want to return it here actually. Essentially I want to print that as a string. So let's remove that from here for now. Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. But when we click on this this button, when we click on this examined button, it's actually the interaction. So it's actually going to be our examined press that's going to need this. So with that being said, sorry, if we go to context menu, go to graph, and go back to our event graph, similarly how we've taken this hit actor on the interact, if we get our call examined pressed event dispatcher, so here we go, let's close that, go to examined, and then we'll press add, and we'll put actor, and that is currently set to actor, but if not, you just need to set yours to, sorry, everything's going wrong now, actor. Go to object reference and make sure that's set. You can see that this is now updated with that, and again we can plug that in, hit compile, and then from here this will then link to this main press, and we've got actor here. So what we can do is, instead of it saying examined, we can take this actor, we can say get description message, plug that into there, plug that description into there, and plug that into that string. Similarly, how we checked to see if this was valid before we did this, we should do the same thing. So I'm just going to make it look a bit neater again, add these extra lines in, and I'm going to do a is valid with the question mark one. So let's check to see if it's valid before we do anything. is valid, yes. Double click that, put that there. So if it's valid, we're going to get the description. So let's compile, let's play. Let's right click on our door and examine. This is a mighty door. And on here, this will just get, oh, this is getting the same text. So that is because when we set in this actor reference, once we have clicked on another object, this actor is still set as the door or the previous thing that you've clicked on. So what's probably a good thing here actually would to be, let's clear this actor. Now I'm thinking it's probably better to do that from here, from the context menu. And essentially what we'll do is we'll just run a delay of 0.2 seconds for both of these, let's say. And then we're just going to get the actor and set it. And this will essentially set this actor to blank or nothing. Let's hit compile, let's play. Let's right click on the door, examine. This is a mighty door. And if I right click on this cube and examine, we don't get an option now. Which we should get an option. So let's check the update here. So this should be getting the display name if it's false. Which it doesn't appear to be. So let's have a look. So we're getting that text. We'll go back to our main. Let's have a look. Examine. Oh, so if it's not valid, if it's not valid, do a print string, and we want to say this has been examined. Oh, actually, what we could say is, what is this? So I know what this is. This is a mighty door, but this cube, what's this? We don't know. So essentially what you can do is you can build onto this now. You can add in the name of your object. So you can add in some extra options. So we've got description, we've got the option for the menu. But what you can do is, if we press play, you can still see this says this. Sorry, you can still see that this says BP door. We can create another one here to say get object name, get object name. Again, this is going to have an output of a string for name. We'll hit compile and save. I'm just going to speed through this bit now because it's pretty much repetition at this point. I'm just going to double click on get object name. This is going to have an output of name, which if we hit compile, we can say that this is mighty door. Hit compile and save. And one extra thing I might mention is if you actually set these variables to instance editable, so we'll set the description, the name, and the context menu to editable. What you can actually do is from outside here in the editor, you can actually set all of these in the details panel. So you can change this on the fly. So you don't have to go into the blueprint of every object and change it. You can do that just there. But then not forgetting, you do need to adjust your context menu. We'll go back to context menu. We'll go back to designer. And where it says interact with, where it says object, what we can do now is go back to this function and say if it has this interface on it, what we want to do is we want to get name. Oh, spell that wrong. Get name. Get object name as a message, and we'll plug that into there. So essentially what it's doing is if it's got a name, set it. If it's not, just get the display name of the object, which would be BP door. And if I press compile, that's going to be connected to that. That's fine. Hit play, right click, open mighty door or examine mighty door. This is a mighty door, but this still is a really long name, and this is still a cube. So I tried speeding that up there towards the end. I hope that didn't get too messy. I hope this helped. If this did help, please consider giving me a like and a subscribe if you want to see more. If you run into any issues, please consider leaving a comment or joining the Discord and chatting with us there. I can help you out. Hope this did help, and that's pretty much it. I'm not going to dwell on it too much. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.